Hello, everyone. Week number 6 Q&A. I look at Google Doc before the session there, and then for the lecture themselves, we don't have that many questions. Not very surprising because I think that's only the final bits for the loops and array lecture. I think so far you have solved many problems using loops and array, either in your labs or in your practice programming test number 2. So I think we have seen many problems already. So hopefully loops and array, you're feeling very comfortable. And I do see a list of questions related to the tutorial videos about OO, which I'm happy about to go over with you. I think there's some clarification I think will be worth doing today. And maybe with a little bit Eclipse, excuse me, maybe with a little bit of help on the Eclipse. All right, so let me just go over them and then we'll see how much we can cover today. Let me just remind you very quickly, your programming test number 2 will be this week, right? According to your semester calendar. So remember previously I sent a message saying that we have extended the time for your programming test 2. It will be 2 hours rather than just 90 minutes, right? Just for your advantage. But you have to make sure within the 2 hours, you have to make sure you download the package, download the projects, import it, complete your task, export it, export the right file, and then upload to Eclipse and then click on submit. So you have to do everything within the 2 hours, right? You know, you give it more time, but you want to make sure you really allocate enough time for your submission. It's really important, right? We also got some policy in the announcement about if you send us the email attachment, how we're going to deal with that, with the penalty, right? You can refer to the announcement for detail. And there will be about 4 problems for you to solve. So 2 of them will be very similar to what you did in the tutorial or in the labs. And then another 2 will be something more challenging for you to solve, right? So 4 problems in total that you're going to solve for the programming test number 2. And of course, OO is not going to be covered in your programming test 2. Some of you actually asked in the forum. I just want to clarify once more. And for your programming test 2, it's only about loops and array. Okay, only the topic over here. And then yesterday I sent out the written test number 2 guide. Okay, about the coverage. The format will be identical to what you did for your written test number 1. So format-wise, it will be the same. I will try to make some practice question for you, maybe either later this week or maybe early next week, but before the test for sure. I will try to do that. But at least you should really look at it, what's going to be covered in the written test, which will happen next week. Look at what's going to cover, and then you should really catch up with the lectures or tutorial videos if you haven't been doing so. All right, and then about your lab number 6. Okay, lab number 6 is the part 2 for your OOP lab. So I think for lab number 6, you can really read the instruction and do the work. I think it's going to be some fun lab to do because you're going to manage multiple classes for your lab. So I'll let you struggle a little bit with it. You can ask me questions today if you wish, which I'm going to deal with anyway for the Google Doc. Okay. But one thing I want to point out to you, which will be very crucial. So there is a written notes, which I referred you to in both the tutorial videos and the lab instruction. Let me show it to you quickly, right? You want to make sure you go over this notes carefully. Okay, over here. If you, let me show you how you can find it. Okay, if you go to the lecture site and then go under week number 7, and then you will see the written notes over here, right? So the first one is really what you were given for lab number 5 about how you can infer JUnit tests from, how you can infer Java classes from JUnit tests. That's something you have read already. And this will be the documents to read. Okay, this one here about point collector, and point collector tester. It's a very thorough document to walk you through about how you can manipulate multi-value reference type attributes. So that will be definitely helpful for your lab and also your programming test number 3 later. All right. That's about the notes. But if you got questions about it, you can also ask me if you wish. All right, that's about the agenda today. Sorry, not agenda, just some quick reminders. And also week number 7 lecture, which I released yesterday, right? That one is just about also to reiterate and also to mention about some new aspects about OOP, which we didn't cover in the tutorial videos. All right. And any administrative question you want to ask me before I go on to the Q&A? Any question you want to have? You want me to answer before I start? Selmet was asking, where can we find Java project archive? For what? You mean for the lab or for the test?
Hi, Professor.
Hi.
For test.
Sorry, so I just want to clarify. So you meant the project archive file for programming test?
Yes.
Yes. So the format will be identical to your programming test number 1. So there will be 2 links, which I'll make an announcement later today. There will be 2 links on the common e-class site, the class site for the MMO, right? So go there and then you will see 2 links. One would be to do the academic quiz, just to make sure we let you understand the policy. And then the actual test will be a link. Once you click on the link, you will be assigned a question. And the question there will actually give you the PDF instruction and also the zip project archive to download. It's also the same identical formats to the practice test that we gave to you. It's just so identical. So does that answer your question?
Great, thank you. I tried to find it.
Okay, please. Okay. No, you wouldn't see the links for programming test 2 just yet. I'm going to make it available later tomorrow. So for now, you will only see the practice test for programming test 2. That's all you will see. Okay, but you will see the actual test maybe tomorrow. All right.
I'm already done. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, we got one question here from Sarah. And good question here. Okay, that one actually, I don't think that one's actually in my agenda, so I can talk about it. Let me read the question here. If we have 2 arrays, let's say array 1 and array 2, okay? And then can we use array 1 equals array 2 to check if they are the same? All right, let's see this. So let's say integer array. Integer array, let's say array 1 is, let's say 1, 2, 3. And then we got also another array over here, let's say ARR2, which is maybe 4 and 5. Apparently, you can see the 2 arrays are different. However, let's see how we can do this, right? Apparently, you can really use a JUnit assertion to actually check it, right? I'm going to write it down here. You can also try it out yourself as well. You know what? Why don't I actually do this one here right away in the JUnit test? So you can also see the complete coding. Let me try that. And Sarah's question was, eventually we want to do ARR1 equals ARR2, right? So what this will do, right? I'll get there. Okay, let me just try on here. So let's go to the project I created for week number 6, and let's now create a new JUnit test, right? Let me just create a package over here as usual. So JUnit tests over here, and then let's say new JUnit test class over here, and then let's say new JUnit test. Okay, that's version 4. Let's say just tests. Okay, we're going to put various tests over here. And then add to the library. Good. Okay. Let's now try this. Integer array, let's say ARR1. Let me follow the same name that Sarah suggested. So ARR1 is, let's say here, 1, 2, 3, 4 over here. And also integer ARR2, which is another array over here. Let's say it's simply, you know what? Let me say this. All right. So guys, let's have a question for you. If I say ARR1, ARR2, right? It looks like the contents of the 2 arrays are the same. Size 4, and also pair. They got index-wise, they got the same element: 1 and 1, 2 and 2, 3 and 3, 4 and 4, right? So now, if I say assert true over here, ARR1 equals ARR2. If I run the JUnit test, do I expect a green bar or red bar? You can put your answer on the chat, or you can simply speak up about this question here. So should I expect a green bar or red bar?
Red.
I heard red. Okay, I heard red, and I see green. I got red. Michael, red with a question mark, which means you're not too sure. Okay, I see false. False, you meant red. Okay. Okay, let me just choose sign. Are you here, sign?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, why would you think there's a red? Why?
Because the address for both arrays are different.
The address of the two arrays are different. Yes, exactly. The starting address. Let's be a little bit more precise. Okay, very good. Let's now run the test. You will see red bar. Okay, first of all, okay. You know what? Before I try to actually go back to iPad, I would like to do one thing here. Okay, let me put a breakpoint here. You can also try. If I say I want to debug this particular test, let's say I'm now here. Okay, you can simply say if you click on ARR1, it simply just give you the content, not the address. And also you do ARR2, it also give you just the contents. So what you can try is if you go to expressions over here, let me remove the previous one. If I say ARR1 equals ARR2, it's going to give me false. Okay, the reason is, okay, so as we, I think I explained this. I don't think maybe the lecture, but for sure in the tutorial videos. I forgot which week, but you can check. Let's say ARR1 over here. ARR1 basically store the starting address of an array of size 4. So 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3. So actually, sorry, only 3 elements. So let me talk about actually on the paper. This particular example, which is slightly different from the Eclipse. So this one here, we got 1, 2, and 3. And think about ARR1 stores the starting address of this particular array in the memory, right? So diagrammatically, we're going to say ARR1 actually points to the starts of this particular array. But if you want to get to either index 0, index 1, or index 2, you have to say ARR1, like index something, for example, 0, right? Similarly, if you look at ARR2, ARR2 actually also points to another array which is different, right? So this one here is going to be index 0 and 1, that'll be 4 and 5. So here, when you say ARR1 equals ARR2, what you're really asking is, are ARR1 and ARR2 pointing to the same array objects? The same array objects. And in this case, apparently different objects, right? You can see this object versus this one here. So this is going to give you false. That's why we saw the red bar, from the Eclipse. Okay, let me go back here. Let me stop over here. Now I can, so you should really say not equal to. So that will give you green bar. And let me go a little bit further. Okay, how do you compare the contents of the array? Let's go back to this particular example, right? Let's say ARR1 and ARR2 are pointing to 2 different array objects, okay? And then if I say, well, how can I compare the contents of the array? You can use the equals assertion, yes. Assert array equals. Right, that's something we did previously, right? You can feel free to use it. And then I'm going to put ARR1 over here, ARR2 over here, all right? And that one is going to give you green bar, all right? Guys, one more question for you. And this could be relevant to your written test number 2, right? So it's nice to do some practice together. Let's say we got this. And now, what if I say the following? Let's say ARR integer, let's just say this, ARR1 is assigned to ARR2. All right. And now, if I say assert true, you can see line number 18 and also line number 14 are actually the same. But now, am I going to get a green bar or red bar for this new assertion? Previously, if I simply say ARR1 equals ARR2, I'm going to get a red. But what about now? Okay, I can see from Joseph, it will say green, and from Shehab, it's going to be green. All right. Okay, it seems to be green. All right, let's double check, and then I'll visualize that quickly. Right? If I do this, I'm going to get a green. It's simply because, for example, over here. So let's say after this line, if I say ARR1 is assigned to, okay, let me just over here. If I say ARR1 is assigned to ARR2, basically what this does is it's going to copy whatever starting address that's stored in ARR2, copy that over to ARR1, right? Let me write it down. Copy the address store in ARR2 into ARR1. Okay, so this is what it means. And there's something we actually repeated actually a few times already in both the lecture and also tutorial video. That's how you can get aliasing. Okay, aliasing means for the same objects, either array or some other objects, like a person object or member objects. For the same object, you got different names for the same objects, right? Exactly. Yeah, that's aliasing. So now you can see that after this particular assignment over here, what's going to happen is ARR1, rather than pointing to over here, is now going to point to wherever ARR2 is pointing to. So that's what's happening over here, right? So that's why after this, if you say ARR1 equals ARR2, it will be true, right? Because now they're pointing to the same objects. And from Umia, is the data in the original ARR1 lost? Okay, good question here. I would say it depends. In this particular case, the data over here, you can see the array. If there is no other name, no other variable that's pointing to this particular variable over here, there is something called garbage collection in object-oriented programming language, right? So let me just put it here. If no other variables store the address of, so let me call this the blue array, okay, of the blue array. Then it may be garbage collected. And when I say garbage collected, it means the memory that will that's been taken to occupy this particular array may simply be freed. Okay. However, the garbage collection process is something that's hidden from you, and that's done automatically by Java runtime. So you don't need to worry about this process here. But when you guys actually get to 2031 in the second year, that one there will introduce to you the language about C. So you can think about C, it's more like a predecessor to Java without the object orientation. So in the C language, whenever you're creating any memory, you want to make sure you are the person to release the memory when necessary. Otherwise, you're gonna just occupy too much memory when you're not using so much. All right. However, that's not something you should worry about for garbage collection, but just for your knowledge. All right. All right, guys, any questions? Sarah, is that okay? I think that's kind of response to your question. I hope that answered your question here. If you got, Sarah, hopefully you're fine. If you got any follow-up, let me know. Okay, okay, but how can we check if two arrays are the same in a if statement working? Okay, I see. You're basically asking about, you know what? Let me check something. I kind of forgot this particular detail. Let me see if I can do it. Let me try this quickly. I might just be able to say this. Let me try this. If I do this, this will be green bar. Okay, okay. So if you really want to compare, okay, so this one here, let me just put a note over here. Equals compares the addresses stored in ARR1 and ARR2. And then here, dot equals compares the contents of the two arrays. However, I think for using the equals method, you have to be very careful. That requires the concept about whether the equals method depends on what type of value is actually stored in ARR1 and ARR2. Let me just use one example to show to you. Okay. Let me just try give you one example here, and then okay, let's see this. Let's say we got you know what, Sarah, I would suggest this because this might take some time. Let me say this. I will try to cover this again. I just need to prepare some good example. However, I will summarize exactly what you should do. If you were asked, I don't think you were asked anything about this in the test, so this may not be so urgent. So let me just say this, to be extended by Jackie, okay? I will prepare about this discussion over here, maybe for next Monday, so I can prepare for the example. However, I would say what you can do is this. Given two arrays, ARR1 and ARR2, okay? So there are two cases over here, okay? If these arrays store primitive values, for example, let's say integer, which I just showed to you in the JUnit test. In that case, you can say ARR1 dot equals ARR2. Okay, this will be okay. So this one I already showed to you. However, here is a complication which I will try to illustrate not today, but maybe next week, so I can get prepared. For case number 2, if the arrays store reference values, for example, we talk about the member class, right? Let's say you got an array of member. Let's say you got 2 arrays of member over here, okay? And then when you say ARR1 dot equals ARR2, over here, so I will put a cross over here. So by default, the behavior is not really what you really intend to actually do, okay? What's going to happen is if you say ARR1 to ARR2, so this will actually compare not the contents, but addresses. Stored in each index. So I would say for this part here, I will try to elaborate on this a little bit further, maybe next week by using some example. But this is a part I would suggest you don't need to worry for now. So Sarah, would that be okay? All right, no problem. Armin, question.
So is string considered a primitive or a reference value?
String, good question. Even though I said it already. You want to take a guess, Armin?
Reference.
Good. Why? Why would you think that's reference type?
Because it's capital and all of
yeah,
the
okay, very good. Good judgment. Yeah. Okay, string is a reference type. So there is only a small number of primitive types in Java. You got integer, you got double, you got Boolean, you got character, right? Whatever we talk about in the elementary programming lecture. So when you say reference type, basically, when you talk about reference type, it can come from two different sources, either one. Either it can be some class name, class from Java API. And when I say API, it's simply a Java library. So Java library could be Java can be array list, it can be string, it can be hash table, and etc. We'll talk about Java API at the end of the course. Okay, and then another one, another source is the class you declare in your projects. Okay, and typically you're right, it should be capitalized. So reference type is any class that either is already available in the API for the Java, which you have to import, of course, or any class that you create yourself and then define in your model package. So that will be reference type, right? So Armin, is that okay? Your hand is still raised.
Yeah, I got it.
You okay, right? Okay, good. Yeah. But guys, I think Armin is making a good point, good question here. I think a common confusion, as I keep saying, is string may be misunderstood as a primitive type, but it's not. String is a reference type. Okay, that one of your questions in the Google Docs related to that. I'll speak about it when we get there. All right, good. Guys, as a promise, I will speak about how you can compare array of references maybe a little bit later, because you're still learning about array of references in the tutorial video this week and next week. So I will wait this a little bit. Otherwise, you might be just confused. Okay, but you don't need to worry about this case for sure. You don't need to. Okay. All right, let me go on to really talk about the actual question in the Google Doc. Okay. This question here, nothing to do with how you solve lab number 6. Okay. I think your colleague's question is basically, let me just try to symbolize this question a bit. Basically, let's say if you got a model, right? Remember, you got JUnits test package. And then over here, let's say you got a class, let's say test, just say test.java, right? Let's say under the model package, let's use the tutorial example. You got your member class, and also you got your, let's say, trainer, right? Let's say these are the two classes. Okay, so you can see member and trainer, they are in the same package. Test class is just in a different package, right? So now we got two cases over here. Let's say for member, in the member class, to use trainer in the same package, right? You can see that in the same package, model package. There's no need to import, right? There's no need for you to say in the beginning of the member class to say I want to import trainer. It's not necessary to do so because they both belong to the model package. All right, that'll be case number 1. And for case number 2, which is what I emphasized in the lab instruction, let's say in your JUnit test over here, to use any class from other package, I mean any package other than JUnit test, from other packages or package, let's say package, and import is needed, import statement. Yeah, as you, for example, let's say over here in the test, you may want to say import, and then you'll say model package dot, let's say member. This will be necessary because they belong to different packages, right? So that's why. But inside the same package, you don't need to say the import. Specifically to your lab number 6, that should not be a concern. Actually, for specifically for your lab number 6, you should think about the two cases. Number 1, let's say you got multiple classes in the model package, and then if somehow one class need to refer to another one, you don't need an import. Okay, that will be case number 1. For case number 2, if you when you look at the test cases that's included in the JUnit test, because it's in a different package from the model package, in that case you will have to make sure you do the import. So that's my response to this question here, right? Armin, You still got question here?
That was from before.
Okay, sure, no problem. Guys, are we okay with the import over here? So just there are simply two cases, okay? For Yang, the package is more than just a folder, correct? You can think about package is really like a way to organize your classes in Eclipse. It's a very special term. But when you say folder is just like a folder or directory. It's simply the normal terms we use when we try to organize your file system. So definitely it's different. Yeah. You can think about the package is like a one scope for the classes. So when you talk about one particular class, it's only within the scope of its residing package. So whenever you want to use any class outside this particular package, you have to import, for example, import member into test. All right, very good. Okay. Yeah, I think, guys, this very good question here. I think that's more like a practical aspect about how to use the IDE. That's good. Yeah. All right, let me move on to the next one. Okay, so it's a very important question over here to answer. When is the use of this keyword required? Okay, I think it would be worth for me to, first of all, I will summarize the principle, and then I will do some example quickly on Eclipse. This will be the number one number one important point to understand for OOP for sure. Okay, let's talk about it. Okay, so this is a keyword in OOP, and then let me just tell you when to use it. So several points. Number one, this is, okay, when I say this, I mean the keyword, is always, okay, let me say this, is implicit for each mention of an attribute variable. For each mention of an attribute. I'll explain to you what I meant in a moment. Point number one and point number two. This is necessary when an attribute name clashes with the input parameter name. Okay, I'll illustrate the point one by one. Input parameter names. Okay, number three. One more time. Okay, one more. This denotes the context objects. And when we talk about context objects, so there are two cases for you to think about for the context objects. Number one, when we try to create a new object creation. And number two, when you try to make a method call, either to call an accessor method or to call a mutator method. So method call. All right, guys, so these are the three principles for you to be aware of. And let me illustrate this on Eclipse, okay? Let's go one by one. Let's go for number one. This is implicit for every mention for each attribute, right? Let's do this one first, okay? Let me go to Eclipse, and then let me create a new class over here. Let's say, let's go back to here. Package Explorer, and okay, right click, and then I would say package model. Let me create a new class. What about I simply just say, let's say, make it very easy, rectangle. Okay, you know the geometrical shape, rectangle. And say finish over here, right? And how should we characterize a rectangle? How many attributes should we have? Any suggestion? How should we characterize a rectangle? Anyone? Any suggestion before I start typing? Length and width. Very good. Thank you. Let's, for simplicity, why don't we just make integer? Integer length, integer width. And of course, we got make them private. Okay, so these are the two attributes. And then, so this is where we declare them. So we don't really mention them, not yet. Okay, so let's try two examples here. So the principle we talk about apply to both constructor and also methods. Let's just do constructor and methods. So we can say public rectangle over here. And then let's say we want to initialize, let's say we just want to initialize, let's say length and width. Okay, so I can say integer new length, integer new width. In general, the names of the parameter can be arbitrary. So you are the developer, so you can choose any name you like. So I'll just choose these two names. Okay, and then when I say length is assigned to new length, width is assigned to new width over here, right? So now this will be the first point I would like to talk about, right? Let me do a capture over here and then go to over here, all right? Give me one moment. Hopefully it's gonna work, good. So this is the first point I would like to mention, okay? Let me say this. You can see the length and width over here. So these are dimensions of attributes. Right? You can see this one is referring to length and this one is referring to width, right? Implicitly, it would be as if you put a this in front of it, okay? Implicitly. It is as if you actually said this dot length is assigned to new length. And also this dot width is assigned to new width. So these two lines, either this or this. So these two are equivalents. Okay, you can see the only difference is, in this case, the this has been explicitly mentioned. And in this case, we didn't really mention this, but it will be there, just implicit. All right, so that's point number one. That's what I meant, is implicit. Okay, number one. And let me talk about also number three over here. Okay, this actually denotes the context objects, either for object creation or maybe for method call. Let's talk about object creation to start with. Okay. So now what I meant by that is, let's say if I try to use this particular code, I can say rectangle over here. Let's say rectangle. Let's say R1 is new rectangle. Okay, let me just say 3 and 4. Okay, let's talk about this, right? Now, when you got object creation, we know that this particular object you're trying to store the address into, this is the context objects. Okay, and then what's going to happen is eventually we want to create this rectangle objects, right? And then we know for the template for the rectangle, I'll just say rectangle. Every one of them got length and width over here, right? Okay, I'm just going to put the two attributes over here. So we got length and we got width over here. And R1 stores the address of this particular object over here. Diagrammatically, we're going to say R1 points to this particular object, right? Okay, so now how do we understand these two variable assignments the way to understand it is because of this keyword is implicit. So we know that this is equivalent to this particular one. So that'll be better for your understanding about how to trace it, right? So now let's look at this one here. Implicitly, this should be over here. And this over here is really the context objects, which depends on what object creation you're talking about, or method, or what method call you're talking about. In this case, since we got R1 over here, so you can see R1 is the context object. So that means this over here is going to be replaced by simply just R1 and R1 over here. So we are really saying R1.length is going to be assigned to new length, right? And we talk about in the tutorial video, whenever you use the dot notation, that means to look up the address that's stored in R1, go to that particular object. So R1 dot, so we are looking up the address and go to this object here. And then its length is referring to this particular field. Assign that to new length. And what's new length? The new length is the first argument over here, which is 3, right? 3, and then similarly, when you say R1.width, that's going to refer to this field here, new width, second argument, which is 4. Okay, so that'll be 4 over here. All right, guys, is there any questions so far? Okay, I'll still need to talk about point number 2, but I want to make sure you're okay with point number 1 and also 3. 1 is about this keyword is actually implicit for every mention for an attribute, like here. The mention for length and width, I didn't say this, but it will be as if the this was present over here, point number 1. Point number 2, whenever you want to, the this is really useful when you trace the program. This simply represents the context objects. And the one I just talked about is the object that's being created, right? In this case, that will be R1. Okay.
Professor?
Question, yes, please.
So you're telling me that for object creation, RL, which basically stores the starting address of the object, is also the context object.
Right.
Okay, just making sure. Thank you.
No problem, Michael. Yeah, let me just rephrase what Michael was saying. So you can think about R1, you know, maybe this will make it more consistent about how we deal with the case for array. You can think about, yes, R1 stores the starting address for the objects, right? But, you know, we can simply say whatever object, whatever memory that's allocated, it will be its address. So it'll be R1. A starting address is okay, but normally I don't say starting address. And then number 2, the this over here, you can say we only use the this when we try to declare the template, define a template for the class. In that case, whenever you say this, when you trace the code using for methods, you're going to, let me just do one more thing for you. Okay, one more thing. And then I can move on to point number 2. I think that's also a nice walkthrough for all the basics together with you, just in case you're not comfortable with so far. Let me just do one more thing here. Very easy. Let's say public void, and then let's say grow the size. Let's say something like this, okay? I'll try to visualize, I'm not sure this will make sense to you. Let's say if the context object is this particular rectangle, I want to grow its size like this, right? I can grow its width and length and width at the same time to be a bigger or smaller or shrinking to be a smaller rectangle. That's basically what I want to do, right? How can I do that? Okay, I can say grow by, let's say integer some units. All right, and this one here should be quite straightforward, right? What should I do? I want to grow it. So I can say maybe the length plus equal units, and also the width plus equal the units. When the units, of course, I gotta spell that correctly. When the units is actually positive, that means I'm growing it. And when the units is actually negative, I'm shrinking it. So that's okay. I'm just using the same method for both purposes. Okay, so now let me also take a snapshot of this particular method, and let's now complete the points over here. Okay, so this is the method that we just introduced over here. I'm gonna put it here. Okay, so now let's talk about the use of the context objects. So we talk about two cases, either about object creation or it can be about method call. Let's talk about case number 2. Okay, let's see how we can do that. Let me just introduce one more object here. So let me use blue. Let's say rectangle. R2 is new rectangle. Okay, 3, 4, I don't know, 5, 6. So what's really happening over here is we got another object over here, right? I'm not going to trace it. I just want to draw that quickly. Okay, so that means R2 stores the starting address or address of a rectangle object in the memory over here. Okay, and then it's going to be rectangle. And then we got the structure over here being length and width. Okay, 5 and 6. All right, that's R2. And now let's now understand about how you can call a method. So the method I'm showing here is simply a mutator, but calling accessor will be something very similar, right? The same principle, which I'll leave to you. Let's say we try to do the following. Let's say we try to do, let's say, first of all, we do R1 dot grow. Over here, let's grow by 3 units, semicolon. And then we do also R2 dot grow by 3 units over here. And that's kind of interesting over here because you can see this part are identical. We're calling the same method grow, and also we are passing the same input arguments 3 and 3. However, the consequence of doing this will be different because the context objects are simply different. You can see in one case the context object is R2. The other case, the context object is R1. So that's why it will be different, right? But let's now try to trace it together. What's going to happen if I try to do R1.grow? Okay, so actually grow by. Okay, grow by. Okay, what's going to happen if I say R1.grow by? So I'm calling the grow by method over here for the first time, and the argument is 3. So that means the units over here will be replaced by 3. And these two will be 3 as well, right? And what about length and width, right? So this will be very important for you to see. So applying principle number 1, this keyword is always implicit if you didn't mention that, as long as you're referring to attributes. So now in this case, it will be as if we actually said over here, this dot. And also this dot is implicit, right? And that one denotes the context objects. So R1 is the context object over here in this case. So that means this will just be replaced by R1 over here. So what we end up having will be R1.length plus equal 3. R1, looking up the address, you go to the objects and then dot, right? And the length will be simply this, increment by 3. So what we're going to get is 3 increment by 3 will be 6. And similarly, we're also going to increment its width. It will be 2, 7. All right. So hopefully you're okay with the first method call. What about the second one? You can see for the second one, we're calling it grow with the same input. However, the consequence will be different because the context object is now different. It's R2, completely different objects. So now if I try this, R2 is basically the context objects. So that means I'm calling this grow by the second time, right? However, this right now is going to be replaced by R2. So what I need to execute now is going to be R2.length plus equal, of course, the unit is simply 3 over here, right? It's 3. So what I will do is I'm going to do R2.length plus equal 3. So R2, if you try to follow the arrow, is going to go to this particular object and then length plus equal 3 units. So it's going to be basically 5 plus 3, it will be 8. And also you will do the same for width. So 6 to 9. All right. So that's about how to interpret this keyword as the context objects over here. All right. Any question until now? So we have completely explained about principle number 1 and principle number 3 already, right? Any question before I move on to principle number 2? So that might be where the confusion might come from, but we need to talk about 1 and 2 first before you can understand 2 better. Anybody? Okay. Let's now talk about number 2. Okay. For number 2, let me just go to go back to here. Let me temporarily change. You know what? Let me call this version 1, so I can give you both versions. Rectangle version 1. All right, and then I'm going to make a copy here. Let's say version 2. And then I'm going to close all. Let me go to version 2 over here. All right. Now let's say some Java developer, they prefer to really come up with new names. They actually prefer not to really come up with new names every time. So here we can simply choose the same name, length over here, and also width over here. And then here I would say length, and over here I would say width. All right. You can see so far we have not introduced any compilation error. There's no red underline, right? At least you can see that. However, Eclipse is very clever. It kind of suggests to you there's some warning over here. The assignments to variable length has no effects, right? That one might suggest already what you're doing may be logically incorrect. It's saying that you seem to be assigning length to simply itself. You're assigning the same variable to itself, rather than assigning the length, which is the parameter, to the attributes. So that's something I want to explain one more time. It's something called variable shadowing, okay? Let me copy this version over here, okay, quickly. All right, let's now move on to another page. Let me just go do that quickly. Okay, this version over here. You might be wondering, remember what we said about principle number 1? Oh, sorry, principle number 2. Sorry, principle number 1 here. We said that this is implicit for each mention of an attribute. Okay, there is something I didn't really say. Except when variable shadowing is in place. Okay, so here, this is really important. Variable shadowing. Okay, let me go back to here. Okay, let's talk about this particular code here. You can see the length over here, it is true, the length has the same name as the length over here. So applying principle number 1, you would think implicitly this should really mean this dot. No, it's not the case, okay? What's happening over here is the length over here, because it clashes with the length over here. So that means under the scope for this particular method over here, every mention about length is going to refer to the length over here rather than the length that's in a bigger scope. Okay, that's called variable shadowing. I'll write it down for you. You can think about the length is actually going to have some umbrella like this, right? Some umbrella. And then the length over here is simply hidden. So the length over here cannot really see the length over here. You can only see the length over here. Okay, so it's called variable shadowing. Okay, to be more precise over here, this mention refers to the input parameter length. Over here, so length over here is really referring to the length over here, and similarly as well here. That's why from the Eclipse point of view, you're trying to assign length to simply itself. It's simply no effects, right? It's not really what you intended to do. to the input parameter length over here. Okay, rather than attribute length that's being shadowed, that's being hidden. All right, guys, are we okay so far? So that's about what you should not write in your program. Whenever you got any input parameter that clashes with the name of some attributes, in that case, under the scope for that particular method, every mention of that particular name is going to refer to the parameter rather than the attributes. So that's what variable shadowing is about. Okay. To fix this, you have to add explicitly the this keyword. So this is where the this is exactly point number 2. Okay. So this is where, okay, actually, in this case, use of this is necessary to disambiguate. Which means over here, rather than saying length, we're going to say this.length. As soon as you say that, it's going to refer to the length. It's going to go out of the shadow, right? It's actually just going to talk about the length that's in the attributes, right? One more thing to say about the Eclipse, which I also mentioned in the tutorial videos, maybe week number 6, I think. For now, if you move your cursor over the length, you can see that length refers to the length over here, right? It's input parameter. On the other hand, if I try to be explicit about this keyword, this will be necessary. If I say this, as soon as I do that, you can see the length right now is referring to the length. It already go out of the shadow, right? It now is really referring to the length in line number 4. All right. All right, guys. Is it clear to everybody about the 3 principles over here? Okay. So, Michael, were you the person who asked the question about this keyword in the Google Doc?
No, sir, because you answered a similar question last week for me.
Oh, okay, no problem. Yeah, but whoever was asking the question, hopefully that's sufficient for you. But any follow-up question, guys, do you have about this keyword?
Can I have a quick follow-up question?
Go ahead, Michael.
I just want to understand how to properly use the phrase variable shadowing. Like, what's being shadowed? Is it the attribute or is it the parameter?
Ah, okay. It's a good question here. My understanding is, I can double check, but I believe it is the following. So you would say that what's being shadowed is actually Michael, I don't want to say anything that's wrong. Let me check. Good question. Okay, it will be attributes or parameter. Okay, so I will answer you next week about this terminology. I think informally speaking, you can think about what's really happening is the attribute over here somehow is invisible in the scope of this particular method, right? And then, so that's why length will be used instead for this interpretation without this, right? But as for what's being shadowed, I will check it and then I will get back to you on this.
Okay, I have an idea. Maybe, can I?
You have an idea? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, what I can understand is that the shadow is like this local variable length. The parameter length is casting a shadow under its own scope, which is this constructor. And when the IDE comes to this length, like a name, or whatever length name inside this scope, it will be considered as the local variable, not
I see what you mean. Yeah, so I'm not, so now the question is, what's being shadowed, right? So shadow is really, when we use, to be honest with you, I'm not too sure about how to use this verb over here. Yeah, but I think what you're saying, I agree. So you're saying that by declaring this particular length being the same length, by declaring this particular parameter with the same name as an attribute, you're basically casting a shadow over here so that inside this particular scope, any mention about a length is going to be under this shadow over here. So you only see length over here. You wouldn't see the length over here. However, how to use this verb over here, that's something I want to check precisely. Maybe I'll get back to you guys. Yeah. All right, but yeah, at least you understand the idea of how things work. So that'll be more important. About how to use the term, I'll check. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Guys, any more questions just in general about the this keyword? It's really, really important for you to understand the this keyword. Okay. In week number 8, in the coming week for the lecture, we will see another interesting use for the this keyword, which we'll see. But one step at a time. But at least understand these 3 principles over here. That should be sufficient for now. All right. Another thing I will really encourage you to do, even though we never get a chance to really assess you about drawing diagrams, but I would highly recommend whenever you're really trying to do OOP, the best way to really know where you are is really by visualizing the object creation over here. Maybe that's something you have been doing, then good for you. Especially for week number 7. So we talk about how to combine loops, arrays, and also reference types and aliasing. So there will be some complicated example the last part of the lecture for week number 7. If you go there, you will ask yourself the following question: what if I don't really visualize any object creation and also copying of the addresses? If I didn't draw any diagram, would I be able to answer this question here without using Eclipse? I think most likely you would not be able to. It will be way too complicated. So the best way to answer those kind of questions will be you have to visualize the object creation and change the arrows around if you are copying the address over to other places. Yeah, that's my advice. All right, let me move on to the next question. Okay, this one will be very quick. I'm actually very happy the question you guys asked on the Google Doc is something I said you should really try to go over by yourself first before I go over the slide together with you, right? So this one here is just about how to define parameters for constructor or for methods, right? It's really important. This is actually covered in your lecture, but I wouldn't mind just going over the example together with you so have some idea, okay? Let's now consider 3 possibilities, okay? Let's say we have the person class, okay? Let's say we have the person class. Let's say for scenario number 1, would it be okay if we have 2 versions of the constructor, right? So guys, for now, don't look at these 2, okay? For now, only look at this one here, okay? Would this be okay? I got one version over here. I got another version over here. Would this be okay? The first one. Will Eclipse complain? And the hints will be over here. Looks fine. Very good. Okay, the reason that it is fine. So you want to really make sure when you got multiple versions of either constructors or multiple versions of methods, right? Either way. If you actually got distinct lists of parameter types. So now this case will be very easy. This is a list of parameters only with 1 parameter, just 1. And this one has 2. So the lists are guaranteed to be different. So this will be okay. Okay, so this will be okay. What about the second one? Is second one okay? The second one seems to be, well, at least I can see the size, the list of parameters is 2. 2. Here is also 2. Why would that be okay? So Michael, if you think that's okay, why? Any justification? The order of the parameters is different. Yeah, pretty good. The order does matter. So over here, you would, okay, let me tell you why. For number 2, you can think about, if I try to say new person, right? On the right-hand side. If I say new person, if I say, for example, let's say Jim, and also, let's say 46. If I say this over here, would there be any confusion about which version of the constructor I'm calling? String followed by integer, string followed by integer, which does not match integer followed by string. So there's no ambiguity, there's no confusion. So that's why it is okay. All right, that's good. And now applying similar reasoning. What about number 3? Is number 3 okay or not? Number 3 over here, okay, I can tell you one argument here. One justification would be, for this constructor here, even though I have 2 lists over here of size 2 parameter, however, one has fn, the other one has ln, first name and last name. And age versus ID. It seems to be that by choosing different names for the parameters, that should be able to disambiguate. What should it not? I can see the responses from 2 of you. Anyone else? So do you think this might be okay? Given that we got distinct names for the parameters, would that actually make things work? Okay, and from Shahab, no, when calling the function, it will be ambiguous. Exactly. So when you talk about distinct names over here, it's only about how you define the method's body. However, when you try to call the methods, it's a different story. Okay, so this one here, easy. I can simply say person. When I try to call that, I can say Jin. And then, let's say if I say 23 over here. So now, this particular call over here, I would not know which version is being called because this can match the string and integer here. This can also match the string and integer over here. That's why this ambiguity. Even though I got different names for the parameters over here, it doesn't matter. As far as the compiler is concerned, they are concerned about the types over here. All right, so this is not okay. And I believe your fellow student was trying to explain their intuition in the Google Doc. I think their intuition was correct. So you want to make sure you got distinct lists of parameter types. So that's really what matters. All right. Any questions about this? Any follow-up question, guys? Any more? Okay. If no, I'm going to go on to the next one. We got 2 more. Okay, quickly. All right. This one here, this is something I will also trace in detail in week number 7. This one here, I can tell you very quick. I wouldn't trace it in detail. I will want to point out to you. Okay, we are basically creating 2 objects over here. Let's say we are creating P1, 1 new objects. We're also creating P2. Okay, P1 and P2. Right. So that means when the context object is actually P1, we're going to do computation specifically to P1, right? So that's why you're going to get 1 value. And then when you actually try to do P2 as a context object, even though you're calling the same method, but you're going to get the same, you're going to get different result, right? And then we also try to make some mutated call over here. You can see P1 that move up, and also versus P2 that move up, right? So now here's the question. The question was, if I compare line number 3 and 7, line number 3, you can see I say over here, P1 that get distance from origin. And also line number 7, I also say P1 that get distance from origin. You can see these 2 lines are completely identical. But why would they give you 2 different results? Why would that be different, right? So when you actually try to trace this code, the answer should be, it should be line number 5. Because in the middle, between these 2 accessor calls on P1, I try to modify P1's objects actually, right? So that's why it will give you a different result, right? So this particular call is actually, this call is made after the change on P1. On P1 at line number 5. Okay, so that's basically what the slide was trying to show you. But I just want to mention one more time. All right. Any question about this example here? And if you want to know about the detailed tracing about how to call the methods and also how to create the objects, I also did it again for week number 7. All right.
Professor?
Yes.
I just want to ask why you highlighted may, like in the invoking same instance may. Is it because the mutator method might not update the relevant attributes?
It's made. Oh, so Michael, sorry, what was the question? I don't quite get it.
Oh, sorry. I'm just looking at the bullet point.
Oh, I see. Okay, very good. Very good.
Return.
I see. When I say may, okay, you're thinking that may simply means it's not certain, right? Yeah, absolutely. Because, very good question, Michael. Let me be precise over here. Let's say here, we got P1 dot. In this case, it's for sure because you're really changing it. However, in general, get distance from origin. Okay, let me just copy this line. Let's say between these two call in general. Okay, let's say we got this and we got this, right? Between these two. So now in the middle, I might do different mutator calls, which may or may not change the value. That's change the value of the objects that's pointed to by P1. Okay, so possibility number 1, I might simply say P1 move up 1, followed by P1 dot move up -1. So Michael, so here in this case, do you think we're going to get the same result for this and this?
It will be the same result?
It'll be the same result because, for example, let's say if at this point, let's say here, if the y value is equal to 2, for example, just say, actually that's for P1, it's actually 4, right? Let's say 4. So now you're basically saying move up is which is going to increment y by 1, 4 to 5, and then -1, 5 to 4. So you're still getting the same result. So that'll be one scenario, right? Another scenario could be, let's say P1 dot move up over here 1, and then P1 dot move up -2. So now in this case, are we going to get different result or the same result between these two? For the blue, different. Yeah, exactly. So that's why I say may in general, because between the two accessor call, you might do different updates, different kinds of updates between the two accessor call. So it may be that you will actually modify the objects, or it may not update. You may not end up modifying the objects values. So it depends.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, very good. So what will be the lesson learned from here? Whenever, let's say, I got this line here and this line over here, and I got some method call in between, and I simply ask you whether these two method calls will give you the same result. How do you tell? There is no general answer. You have to trace the code to see exactly how things are being manipulated. So that'll be the principle. All right, one more here. All right, this one here, I like this question here. I think maybe Michael, was it you asking this?
Yes, sir.
Very good. I like the question. I think that's good. That's good. So Michael's concern was when I did an illustration and visualization over here, when I do string nationality, right? You can see nationality was declared to be a string type, right? Why do I need to put an arrow over here, right? This is because, and corresponding to our very first question today, very first few questions about whether a string should be a reference type or primitive type, right? Let's now highlight this. You can see for this one here, string is a reference type. Meaning that the nationality attribute over here should store the address of some string objects. So this is the correct interpretation for this particular declaration. If that's the case, so that means the nationality does not store the object inside the inside this particular slot over here per se. Instead, it only stores the address of some string objects over here. That's why this will be the more precise way, the more accurate way to draw it. But for convenience, I think in some illustration for convenience, I simply put, for example, Alan over here or whatever string value. That's not exactly accurate. I think for this clarification over here, number one, you should understand that string is a reference type. Number two, whenever you declare some variable of string type, it's going to store the address of the string objects. So these two interpretations will be very important. And then when you visualize it, I would say string is a very commonly used value over here. You can either try to use this or you can simply put it here. I would say that either way is fine. But the most important is about getting these two straight. So Michael, is that okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, very good. All right, guys, now I am now towards the end of the Google Doc questions. All right, 80 more questions. Sarah was asking, where is this piece of code from? Did I post it? You mean, which piece of code? You mean this one here? You mean the person here? It's from the slides. Okay. From Shahab. A question regarding the test. Sure. If in a function that we are going to implement, we are given the result variable that's to be returned, are we allowed to change how it is initialized? Okay. I think the answer is yes. However, basically, let's say this. Let's say for your programming test 2, public static, let's say some integer. Let's say I'll simply say maybe task number 1, okay? And then maybe I'll just say integer n. Let's say that's what you're given. And then you are simply given some default implementation just to make it compile. So you're gonna say integer result. Initially, it's simply going to be null, and then eventually you're going to return the result. You were asking whether you can simply modify this particular part and say it's going to be a new array, maybe 4 over here. I would say that one is fine. I forgot exactly how I phrased the instructions. Maybe I simply say you don't want to change this line. If in case you're not allowed to change it, it's very easy to work around, very easy. All you got to do is you're going to keep this line the same, okay? And instead, you're going to say result is going to be reassigned to whatever you like. So that would definitely work. All right, I hope that answered your question.
Professor?
Yep.
I think Shahab was asking this because in the practice test that you provided, there were certain questions where the result variable was a Boolean and it was like simple false. And then they realized that the question can be solved using existential property code, but then in that case, then the result variable needs to be initialized to be true.
Okay, yeah. So I would say, how about this? Very good. So I would say unless you're explicitly told that you should not be that you should not modify the initial value, otherwise feel free to change it. But I think Michael, you made a good point. Let's say somehow if what's being provided is, let's say Boolean result is simply assigned to false. And if you believe the initial value should be true, you can simply work around just by saying result is simply reassigned to true. Just write this extra line. Then that'll solve it. All right. All right, very good. Let's see this. Stopping and set. Oh, okay, that's good. Sarah is making a good point over here. Okay, I'll make sure this does not happen in your actual test. Okay, guys, let me show to you very quickly. Okay, I think well, I'm glad you're using debugger. You know, that's really important. Let me just get to the practice test and then I'll explain that. So Sarah was really talking about debugging your practice test. So let's say if I go to your practice test, let me go there and I'll explain to you. Let me just preview it. Okay. The reason is because if I go into the model over here, utilities, right? Let me show you the file. Oh, sorry, the test. Beg your pardon. Go to JUnit test and test utilities. Okay, there we go. So Sarah's concern was whenever she was trying to put some breakpoints, maybe somewhere, and then whenever as soon as you launch the debugger, somehow the debugger will just stop itself, maybe after a few seconds, right? I'm pretty sure that's what happened. The reason is there is a rule over here about the timeout. So the reason that we put this one over here is to make sure if you got infinite loop in any of the tasks, it's going to stop itself in 10 seconds anyway, for sure. So that one is actually there just for making sure this, if you got any infinite loop, your program still is not going to run forever. Each infinite loop will run maximum maybe 10 seconds, right? And when we do the grading for your programming test too, we will make sure we're gonna put this line over there to make sure if your task for a particular test is going to run more than 10 seconds, then most likely you got infinite loop. For simple for the kind of computational problems you're going to solve in this course, it should not take more than 10 seconds for sure, right? So now, how do we solve your problem over here, Sarah? Very easy. Just delete this. Once you deleted it, then you will be able to run the debugger without the debugger stopping itself. But for your programming test on Wednesday and Thursday, I'll make sure I don't put this line over here, just in case you got confused for your debugging process. All right, no problem. All right. All right, guys. Any more questions for me? Okay. Either you can put on the chat or you can just ask me, speak up. We got a few minutes before 4 p.m.
Professor?
Oh,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So regarding the string being a reference type,
Yeah.
so when it's stored, when you assign like a string to, when you pass in an argument that is a string,
Yeah.
and you want to assign it into attribute, into an attribute, does it store the context object, or does it store the, like, what's the actual value inside?
Mm-hmm. It's a very good question. Okay, let me just make sure I understand you correctly. Are you saying that we are trying to pass the string object as an argument, as an input? Are we actually going to assign the object itself or just the address? Something like that, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, very good. Very good question here. The response to it, I will try not to be so, okay, let me say this, okay. For those of you who might be interested, let me emphasize this concept over here is only going to be taught in 2030. It's something called call by value, okay? Which I don't want to go too deep into it, but if for those of you who might be interested, feel free to discuss with me maybe during the office hour, or you can simply do a little research, call by value. Okay, but let me explain that since you guys asked. Okay, let me talk about it quickly. Let's say this. So let's say if I have over here, let's say, we have a person class. Let's say person. And then let's say P1. New person. Yeah, I'll try to explain this maybe in a few minutes, okay? But I'll make sure it's clear. Let's say new person over here, let's say Jim. And then we got another object over here, let's say person P2. And then new person. You know what? Let me just do a little bit better. Name over here. Name over here. String. Okay, I think that's better. Is Jim. All right, let's say we got that, right? All right, so what's happening over here is, let's say for the constructor in the person. And then we simply got string. Let me just choose a different name. Or let's say it's n. And then we say this dot n is assigned to n. So here we are making the assumption that n is simply an attribute, right? That's why we're using the this keyword. Okay, guys, let's talk about this particular example here, and then let's visualize it. Okay, let's now do the first line. This line here is going to say name stores the address of some string objects of which is Jim. So this will be the accurate way of drawing string object, right? Name is pointing to the Jim objects. That one should be okay because string is a reference type. And for the second one here, so we say P1 is basically pointing to a person object. Let's now make it simple. Let's say person objects only got the name attributes. Let's say. All right. So now, how do we visualize this, right? You should think about now the context object is P1. So this will be P1. Okay. And then, okay, this should be n. Beg your pardon. N over here. So we're already saying P1.n. P1.n is going to be assigned to this particular n, which is the argument, right? So I would say as far as this course is concerned, you can think about when I say name over here, so that means the input parameter over here is going to be replaced by just the name, just replaced by that. And also n here is going to be replaced by that. So what we end up having is, let me say star. So star is going to be P1.n is assigned to name. And since P1.n is of type string, reference type, so now we are really copying address. We're copying the address that's stored in name into P1.n. So that means P1.n is now going to point to wherever name is pointing to. That's what's happening over here. So we are really copying address, not the entire string. So no new string objects being created. Okay, let's finish this one here. So that means after this, P1.n is now pointing to this particular name over here. Right? Let's do one more. And then if we try to do this now, let's say P2. P2 is not a context object, right? So P2 stored the address of this particular person objects. And also we got the context object is now P2. And we're calling the person constructor. So this will just be P2. And then what about the arguments? It will just be the same name. So it will still be, again, just the name. So let me put star star over here. So what we end up having will be P2.n will simply be assigned to the name. P2.n is assigned to the same name, right? So now we're copying the same address that is stored in name. Copy that over to P2.n. So that means P2.n is now, let me just finish the structure over here. So P2.n is now going to point to just the same objects over here. All right. So is it AV who asked the question?
It was me.
It was you. Oh, okay, good. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay. So what end up happening is the same string objects actually are aliased into either name or p1.n or p2.n. So they're really pointing to the same objects. All right. All right, guys. Any more questions?
Professor, may I ask one more question?
Go ahead.
So with this scenario, like, can I ask, like, what if you also add another string in between the object creation of P1 and P2? Like name1 is equal to also Jim, and then you put name1 as the argument for P2.
Yeah.
And then therefore it's pointing to also Jim, but is it a different Jim?
Yeah. You know what, Michael, it's a very good question here. However, you know what? Let me delay the discussion about this example here because it's a little bit tricky over here. I can tell you that basically this is what you're asking. Name 1 or name 2 doesn't matter. Okay, you're asking something like this, right? And now if I pass, for example, rather than name, I'm going to say name 1. Okay, and are they going to point to the same objects, right? This is something quite tricky, okay? So I can tell you that the answer is they are going to point to the same objects. They are. Because when Java compiler try to compile your code, they will look at every string literal that's really mentioned explicitly in your code. And for space efficiency reason, they will see that you are using the string literal Jim, and you're also using the string literal Jim over here. So for efficiency, Java compiler is not going to create 2 separate Jim objects at the runtime. So what they will do instead, they will actually do the following. They will say P1 and also, oh, sorry, not P1. They would say here, name and also name 1. They would say name and also name 1. They will both point to the objects for Jim. So Michael, does it make sense so far?
Yes.
Okay.
I understand.
Okay, very good. This is something, guys, you don't have to worry too much. However, this is some confusing part whenever you're doing OOP, because every literal, you actually, if you got identical string literal that's really mentioned in your code, somehow compiler will do some optimization. So when they create name and name 1 at the runtime, they will actually share the same address for the same Instead, this is what you can do. Okay, so the resulting diagram will still be the same. Okay, so what's going to happen is you're also going to get name 1. Okay, guys, let me just do this one here. Okay, just to be complete. So what I will do is I'm going to say here. But if you try this string and 1 is new string. You may have never used this before, but this makes sense because string is simply a class. Of course, you can call it a constructor. You can say n1 is equal to new string, and then Jim over here. And then I can do another one, string n2, which will be new string Jim. So the consequence of this is going to force 2 separate string objects to be created. So Michael, makes sense so far about this?
Yes, it does.
Very good. And now let me just write it down, and then you will see. So now if I say person, P1 is new person, and then I can say maybe M1. And then I can say, okay, let me finish this, and then I think we should really call it a day. Let me just finish that. New, and then person, and then N2. All right, what's going to happen now is, let's say for P1. P1 is going to be here, pointing to a person objects, and then name. And that one there is going to make sure it's only going to point to N1. Point to this object here. And then when we try to create a new object for P2. So P2 is pointing to this particular person object over here. And N. And for that one there, it's really going to be set to be N2. So that means N is going to point to N2. So you can now contrast the two differences, right? One is we're simply trying to create explicitly two string objects, as opposed to we simply use a literal. For this, for efficiency reason, the compiler is going to create just the same objects at the runtime. There's some subtlety over here you got to watch out for. All right. Armin, question.
Yeah, so before you had string name equals gyms, and then you had string name equals new string gyms. What's the difference between the two?
The difference is, in this case, when you use the new keyword, you're saying that I'm going to allocate explicitly a new object in the memory, right? So using two new keywords, make sure these two references will be completely different, even though the contents are the same. This one should be quite easy, right? It's just about using the new keyword. Okay.
But then if you remove the new string and just put gem, then the references will be the same.
Exactly. So for this one here,
but if you have a new string, so every time you have a new something, the program makes sure that it gives it a reference that hasn't already been used.
So every time you use the new keyword, the compiler will make sure they always create explicitly some separate memory space for that. On the other hand, when you only got this case over here, for optimization reason, compiler will see that you're using the same literal twice. So maybe they will simply just create the same objects for you, rather than discrete objects, right?
Why does it matter though that references be different or the same? Because
well, I would say it does matter. It does matter. For example, let's say this, right? For example, let's say in this case over here, you can see P1 and P1.name and also P2.name. They are pointing to the same object. Agree? First of all, do you agree?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yes.
So now, what if I do the following? Let's say P1 wants to change his name. Okay. Let's say, let me put it here. Let me use a different color here. Let's say purple. Let me put it here. What if P1 dot name? Just conceptually, you do not write this directly in Java, right? Just conceptually. If I say P1 dot name is a string, and one of the methods that's supported in the string class is called append. Something like that, right? If I say append, and then I can say, let's say here, I can say maybe junior. Let's say Jim Junior over here, right? So what that will do is it's going to say append junior to the end over here. So you can see modifying the name over here is going to modify at the same time.
So if the reference, so if the references are the same, if you modify one object, it will also modify the all the other objects at the
That's
same
exactly
reference.
the aliasing we have been talking about, right? So aliasing
but then sometimes
means, okay, let me finish. Okay, let me finish. So for the same object over here, since you got different names pointing to it, so using either of the names to really modify the objects is going to be visible by all the others. So that's why it doesn't matter. On the other hand, over here, you can see P1.name is pointing to this object here. If you simply modify this object here, it's not going to have any impacts on the other one, which is independence.
Oh. So you're saying if I have two strings, so I have string A equals hello and string B equals hello, then I say like A dot append junior, then junior will also be appended to the B string.
So that's only conceptual. Exactly how you write it in Java, I don't want to go there. So I would say for the string manipulation, that's not really something you will get into for this course. So that's why here, when I say append, it's not just conceptually. I'm just trying to say, if you try to modify this string object over here, whatever update you do is going to be visible for both P1 and P2. That's basically my point.
Okay.
You know what? You can ask me again, maybe next Monday, if you remember. So I think a string may not be the best example to say this for aliasing. This kind of situation is actually very common. So I can maybe create another example maybe next week, since we're running out of time. I can try to create maybe another 2 classes and then to illustrate this aliasing again. I think string may not be the best example because typically when we talk about aliasing and changes, we don't really use string.
But sometimes you want to do alias changing though.
True, not for the strings. It's not very common. You want to change the string for aliasing.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Questions?
I have, I think, a really quick question. So it's about arrays actually. So say we have an array that has a number of elements, let's say 5 elements, but you want unique elements. So if it's 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, but you just want it to be 1, 2, 3, 4, is there a way to just, is there like a method we can use to just make it unique elements, or would you have to use some like manipulation using loops and stuff, or is there just a very quick method to?
Are you saying that if you got 1, 1, 2, 3, for example, as an array, and then
you just want the unique elements, so just 1,
I don't think there's any method for you to do
2,
that.
3.
I
But you
don't
would,
think
the array
so.
you actually want is just,
Yeah, I think that you just got to
Okay.
implement that yourself to really get rid of the duplicates, I think.
okay.
Mhm.
And yeah, and for the programming test, I know you already went over what's allowed and what's not allowed, and it was pretty specific. I know that what wasn't allowed was obviously going online and searching stuff up, like that's totally not allowed.
Mhm.
But I remember showing you a debugger online. Are we allowed to use like a visualizer, just like kind of like a debugger online?
I think the visualizer you're talking about, just to analyze the execution of your program, yes, that would be allowed. But my question would be, why would you not use the debugger just in Eclipse? Wouldn't that be easier? Okay, Michael, see you later.
I think
Yeah. Okay, Mary, go ahead, please.
remember you and I we were in office hours, and I remember showing you my problems with the debugger, so I was just
Mhm.
wondering.
Okay. So I think,
So-
yeah, okay, just let's say in case your debugger on the Eclipse doesn't really quite work as expected, yes, you can definitely use the visualizer. As long as the visualizer does not provide any kind of solution to you, then you'll be fine.
Of course, so the visualizer that I showed you, would that be okay? I can show it to you again in office hours.
Yeah,
and
sure. Yeah, but I think I remember you showed that to everybody during the syllabus section. I think that should be okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Yes. Yeah, so I'll be using that one because I'm still having problems with my debugger. I'll probably join your office hours to try and fix it again.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah.
Yeah, just come tomorrow or Wednesday and then let's sort it out. Yes.
Yeah, but if I do have problems with the debugger during the test, I'm allowed to use the online debugger, right? Like I won't search anything up, but just
Yeah, positive. You can use it, positive.
Okay, thank you, sir.
No problem. All right, guys. Any more questions? Since you guys are so nice to stay so long. So if you got any more questions, I can answer. Otherwise, I'll see you later. Okay?
Sir, I have a question about array.
Yes. Yeah, array. Okay, go ahead.
So like, is there a way that I can dynamically increase the length of an array?
Okay, good question here. Actually, that's good. You know, you might need that maybe for some question in the actual test, right? So the question is, how can you dynamically increase the size of the array? Okay, good. Dynamically increase the size of the array. Very straightforward. I'll show it to you. For example, let's say you got integer. Let's say sequence, for example, is maybe let's say new. You know what? Let me make it maybe slightly better. Okay, let's see this. You know what? For your event, let me write it down on Eclipse. Okay, let's do this. And then I'll make the code available to you after the session. Let's say model, and then let's say utilities. Over here. Okay, good. All right. Let's have a new problem for you for the practice, right? Okay. Let's say public static integer, and also let's make it more interesting. Let's say string. String, and then let's say grow. Return grow array. And then let's say string array over here. Let's say sequence. Okay, and then I'll explain what the problem is, and then we'll solve it together. Let's say string, let's say result is sequence, sorry, not sequence, let's say null over here, return result. Okay, let's now write a test right away, and then we can see exactly what we want to program. Okay, let me go to tests over here. Okay, let's say what we want to do is this. Public void test get grown array. Okay, let's say this string sequence is, let me say A and B and then C. Okay, so the assumption is every in the input array sequence, every slot actually stores some string value over there, let's say. Okay, and then let's say expected. What we expect to do is we're going to dynamically grow the size of the array, and A, B, and C will still be there, but we want to increase more size. Let's say no. Let's say let's make it simple. Let's say double the size. And then expected, and that should be string array, of course. And let me do one more thing, and then string, and the result would just be utilities dot return grown array, right? Sequence. Assert equals expected and result. Assert array equals actually. Are you okay so far about the test over here? I'm writing here. So with if we're passing this as the input, so we're going to grow, we're going to return another array, and the size is going to be dynamically grown by double. Are you okay so far?
Yeah.
I want to make sure. Very good. Okay. So basically what I'm doing is I'm using the test to specify exactly what I need before I start coding. Okay. Let's now do the coding. Okay. Let me ask you, how would you code it? Do you know? Maybe that's your question about how to do it, right? Basically, you can see this. What I can do is I don't necessarily want to just change the size of sequence right directly. I can do you can see that you can see this. Let me show you some sequence, and then I can say sequence dot length over here. Sorry, it's new string array. Let's say I'll show you exactly. So this part here, I'm just going to copy the string one by one from sequence into result. Okay, so and then I'm going to grow the size. Okay, let's say this, and then I'm going to say for integer I 0, I strictly less than sequence dot length I plus plus. And then I'm going to say sequence, okay, actually, sorry, result I is assigned to sequence I. I'm just copying the string one by one, right? That one's easy. And now I'm going to dynamically change the size of result. You can see currently result is pointing to an array of size, whatever the sequence length, right? Let's say if we talk about, let me close this. If we talk about this particular test, sequence currently would just be a size 3, but we want to dynamically change its size. So what I can do now is I can say, if I dynamically change its size, so now you got to be careful. If I say result is assigned to new string sequence.length multiplied by 2. In some way, I am changing the size. However, it's not exactly what I'm hoping for, right? So think about if sequence, if the result is currently pointing to this particular array, 0, 1, 2, and then it's pointing to A, and also B, and also C. If I do that, right? If I try to dynamically resize it, so I would say result is actually, let's say result is simply assigned to new, the string array. Over here, just simply double the size. I would say result dot length multiplied by 2. So what that would do is it's going to create another array that's much longer, right? It's going to be 0, 1, and 2, 3, 4, and also 5. And that one there is going to be pointed to by the result instead. So that's basically what's happening over here. However, for that one there, you actually lost the contents over here. So this may not be the kind of dynamic allocation you would need. Do you follow me so far?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay. So I would say you can create maybe different intermediate arrays. So what I would do instead, okay? So what I would do instead is like this. I'm going to actually simply just going to create. I can still do this. Let me just do continue with the way. Let me still do this, and then after that, I still need to copy back A, B, and C. That's what I need to do. Okay. Let's do that. But I just want to show you how you can dynamically change the size, but whether or not it's really what you intend to do is up to you. But you have to be careful. Whenever you try to dynamically allocate the array to another object, you will lose all the contents from before, right? It's going to be a brand new array. So let me just go back here and make sure the test can pass. So I would say here, after this, I would say 4, pretty much like that, right? This code here may not be very efficient, but just to show you. So now after this this reallocation, all slots store nulls. So that's why I got to copy them over. Okay, I think this one should be okay. Let me just try. Green bar. Okay, so does it help?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, so I think let me just recap very quickly about my points. If you really want to say you actually assign the result to be some size over here, and then at some point in your program, you want to dynamically resize it. That's how you do it. You simply just say result is reassigned to some new array objects with whatever size. However, you need to be careful. Whenever you do this, reassignments with a new array creation, you're simply just going to create another new array, which means whatever that's stored before is simply not there, right? So whether or not it's really what you really intend to do, I'll leave you to decide.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Very good. So guys, any more questions? All right. if no question here, and then I think tomorrow.
Wait, I have a question.
Yeah, you gotta be quick. Yeah. So let me just say, for tomorrow, I will still got the Q&A in the morning for the people in the different time zone. I don't have many people coming yesterday. Sorry, last week. So we just run it one more time. If yeah, we'll just see. Otherwise, we're gonna go back to the original afternoon session. All right, Armin, gotta be quick. Last one.
So in the lab assignment, it said we cannot import any external objects. But then with the problem with the string is if you do plus equals, it's the same thing, it's copying, like you said. And string builder is not imported, it's in default class in the thing. So can we use that instead of string? If we want to
Yeah, if you want to use string builder, yes, you can use it without, importing it. Maybe I'm not too sure.
So we can use whatever we want as long as we don't have to import anything.
Yeah, that's true. However, I don't think anything that you don't have to import will be useful to your test.
No, because there was like a question in the lab, and what I did is I had a loop, and in the loop I had string plus equals something. Yeah. Then that's really inefficient because when you're doing plus equals, you're
I wouldn't worry
string.
too much about that inefficiency. I wouldn't worry about it.
Okay.
Yeah. Because for you can use a string builder if you yeah, a string builder, yes, it's going to be more efficient, but I don't think that if that kind of efficiency is going to give you any bonus, for this this test. Why not just use plus equal? I think that one just easy. Once you get to maybe 2030 or maybe 2011, where efficiency will be more important to be assessed, in that case, maybe you can use a string builder instead. But for now, I think for our problems, using plus equal will be just sufficient.
Okay.
All right. All right, guys. If no more question here, I'm gonna stop here, and then I might see you tomorrow in the morning, the Q&A. Otherwise, good luck to your programming test.
It's in the morning again?
It's in the morning again.
Wait, so from all Tuesdays, it's at 9:30 from now on?
Yeah, that's what I said in the announcement.
Oh,
we'll run it maybe for one more time. If people don't show up, Tuesday attendance has been quite low as well. I'm not too sure if people can really benefit from that session there. So we'll see. Yeah. All right. I'm going to stop the recording now. Okay. Have a good night. I'll speak to you later. Take care.